I'm going to do some drawing videos related to perspective of a little bookshelf. I'm going to talk about a lot of different ideas and concepts that will come into play and just have a lot of fun. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about trying to understand how we can not have to rely on vanishing points and horizons that are so far away when we're trying to draw most things that it's really tricky to try to use that. But the idea is very helpful in that if you can find a vanishing point, then that tells you the direction of any line that is going in that direction. So any line that's parallel with these lines that I like to say are going away and to the right will all end up going towards a vanishing point way out there. And all these, everything lined up with these lines, including back in there and there and there and there and there, and even these little guys down here, and that might be a little tapered, but I'm not worried about that right now. Those will be going off to a specific vanishing point. So if I'm drawing something and I'm trying to figure out what the angles are, and I have a vanishing point way over here, that will help me point exactly and figure out those angles. But like I said, that's a little crazy. So what I'm going to talk about here is, first of all, just making sure we understand the idea about within any vertical plane. For example, this front face would be a vertical plane. We can, if we find a few sort of major perspective guidelines, it's fairly easy to start intuiting where things will go, and to just talk about that real quick. If this was a plane and I was of lines that were going away and to the left, first of all, I would make sure I understood where the midpoint was. I might draw a midline. But then I'm more importantly going to sketch in that halfway line, which for vertical planes is handy because it will connect the midpoints of each of the lines, the vertical lines in that plane. And we'll subsequently do the same in the rest of the plane. So I'm just finding midpoints. That wasn't very close. In between the midpoints. and then doing that, and sort of the top angle and the bottom line angle are the most different, and everything in between basically kind of averages out to try to get to the next hopefully that makes sense, and that they would be pointing towards a vanishing point that way, but hopefully you can see that each of these lines is just getting subsequently a little bit more angled. And that is a great way to start just sort of understanding. And what I am going to suggest you do is just take any point and see if you can point it in a direction that just seems to flow with the others. And it can be anywhere. And it can go either direction. So I'm really just trying to make sure that I'm kind of averaging things out when I'm going in. If I start here, I'm looking at these guys and sketching in an angle and keeping my eye on those and making sure that it seems like that's about halfway angled. So this is, you know, obviously not super accurate, but it's a great way to just start getting familiar with doing this. And I'll do another one like this that would be a vertical plane and a little bit different situation, but the same idea holds. And that I'm going to find a midline as well as this mid horizontal. Checking that it goes through that middle point and that it's halfway on the vertical edges there. And then I'll do the midpoints of the midpoints. And that'll get me going. And then if I have something up here, I'm going to think about, well, it needs to make sense with this one and this one. Something here. Makes sense with that. And it can, the cool thing, and the thing we're going to get into next, is that everything that's parallel with any of these edges, or any of these edges, anyone that's in the same group will act in a way that sort of follows like a giant master plane. And that can be a little bit confusing, but it can also be very helpful. And depending on, once again, how tricky it is to find a vanishing point, can come in really handy. So practice that. Just make some vertical planes. Oops. Do a little crisscross. That can be tricky the more sort of angled it gets, so I want to make sure that I'm using the information that I know can help, and that I want those midpoints. And I could find that again for that one, etc. And we can also start, if we need to, depending on what we're drawing. It's pretty easy to just continue adding on. I'm not going to get too in it. There's some cool midline crisscross things that help with that as well. But I think it's great practice to kind of practice doing these lines, and these obviously aren't perfect, but in it's sort of a sequence and a pattern that seems to have a consistent shifting of the angles. We'll get a little bit more specific with stuff. Do that, like I said, and do it for all sorts of different kind of vertical planes. And I'll be back with more that's going to be more specific to this one. And I'm going to be talking about understanding this bookshelf in a way that every line that is going away and to the right I can set up this main away to the right plane, and then anything that's parallel with anything going in that same direction will follow this idea. I have a lighter version. It's going to be easier to see. And the reverse is true for the other direction, the ones going away to the left. We'll all be following sort of a outer master plane there. I will, yes, like I said, come back and do some more on that soon.